Stephen interviews you, discussing topics that matter to you. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, smash the like button, and feel free to share it with others so that they can see it too. And if you're new to this channel, please feel free to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can get updates on what I'm doing for this channel. Thank you all so much for your support. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Stephen Interviews You. And this is episode number 31. And I am joined by a very special guest.
Hi, Doug Joubert from OnSI Tulane, part of the Sports Illustrated Network.
Nice to have you on, Doug. And let's just get right to it. So for starters, how did you get into sports reporting in the first place? What is your backstory? How did you get into sports in general? What made you decide, yeah, I want to go into sports reporting?
I think like most of us that love sports, I know you love Ohio, the real Ohio University, and it is part of our blood over a period of time. And back in the old days when I was in college, I was working at the college radio station and at Louisiana Tech University, and we wanted to do our own broadcast of the Louisiana Tech ball games, which in those days there were no licenses. And so we just went ahead and showed up on top of the press box and started doing the games just live. Of course, the FM station we had was like 10 watts. So it didn't get much past the campus, but it was fun. And then later on, got my degree in education, but worked my way through college by working in radio because it's just something I just enjoyed. And then a few years later, after I worked in education for a while, long story short, give you the Reader's Digest version, I realized that radio was a way to make a lot more money than being a teacher. And so in Monroe, Louisiana, I started working at KNOE AM FM in Monroe, and I became the sports director there, and just did like, what was it, 12 sportscasts a day on the radio on the two stations. And then from there, I started doing high school play-by-play. Then I moved to Natchitoches, Louisiana, which is, if you can imagine the boot of Louisiana, it's in the back of the heel, Natchitoches is. Back of the ankle, that is. And started doing play-by-play for Northwestern State University, did that for 9 years. And in the meantime, in the Louisiana Sports Writers Association, I won lots of different awards. I'm not going to go all that stuff, but essentially for doing sports. And then came down here, did Saints, pregame and postgame for the Saints Radio Network. That didn't work out, but then eventually I got back into the classroom and did sports on the side, some public address announcing, but still some play-by-play. And then after I retired from teaching, I said, hey, let me get back into the reporting business. And Sports Illustrated needed someone to take over their publishing of the OnSI site for Tulane, and I can go into that more detail later on if you'd like. And I've been doing it ever since. And I write 2, 3, sometimes 4 stories a day, along with my reporter that I have. And we do various interviews with the athletic director and the coaches and the players, et cetera, and post those on our YouTube channel. So that's how I got from point A to where I am right now.
Yeah. So Sports Illustrated, which is what you're associated with. What is it like in general working for Sports Illustrated? Because everybody knows what Sports Illustrated is all about.
Yeah. And they're very definitive about making sure people realize we're only part of the Sports Illustrated family. I am not the Pat Forty, the guy who's one of the big writers for them. I'm not that. What they have a different model that they use for various online sports. So what happens is there's the Sports Illustrated family, SI.com. And then underneath that, they have various families. And I'm in the family of what's called ON, the word ON, O-N, and then SI in capital letters. So I'm part of that part of the network for Sports Illustrated. And what we are is essentially contracted, not employees, but we're contract kind of people where my job is to follow the Sports Illustrated guidebook. They have a specific guidebook that I have to follow that says, this is how you write stories. And I've been doing it for 50 years, so I know a little bit about it. So This is how you write stories. This is what you try to focus on. They try to help guide us into various ideas for stories. They're extremely, extremely helpful to me. And so each one of us, whether it's Ohio State or LSU or Ole Miss or Tulane, we are all individually contracted to work with on SI, and that's who we sign our contract with. And it can be revoked at any time, either by myself or by them. So it's sort of an interesting concept. But essentially, what I do is I am in charge of finding out stories with their leadership and guidance, but finding out story ideas and then writing for them. They do have a very lengthy guidebook. It's like the AP guide that people have used by Associated Press, trying to a style book that people use to go ahead and figure out how to write correctly when it comes to news or sports or whatever, and write a headline, etc. Well, Sports Illustrated has its own guidebook that we have to go by. It doesn't mirror AP's exactly, but it has some of the same ideas. And so we know what a headline should look like. We know what a paragraph should contain. We know essentially how a story should be directed. That kind of thing is very, very helpful. And so writing, I don't write for Sports Illustrated. I write essentially for my site, which is si.com/college/Tulane. So the Ohio State one, which I know you're not an Ohio State guy, so please forgive me for mentioning that. But it's but it's a but theirs is like si.com/college/Ohio State, and then there's LSU's is si.com/college/LSU, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So each one of us is in charge of that site. All of them look very similar, as in the template looks the same, just the colors are different. We get to decide what goes in, and we get to write the stories.
Yeah. So moving on to the Green Wave report, which is how I discovered you.
Oh,
I've watched some of your videos already, Doug, and you have a fantastic voice, by the way. I get really hooked into it when you
thank you.
narrate stories for that channel, the Green Wave report on YouTube. What motivated you and your team to start the Green Wave report?
Thank you, by the way, Stephen. I really appreciate that. And by the way, I've now looked at some of your videos. You look like you have a good time talking with
Yeah,
people. It's fun. It's fun to watch. It's really fun to watch. I've watched about two or three of yours. I plan on watching some more. I've already subscribed, so so I'll know when
great.
the new ones come up. But what happened was we're a small website. I mean, and again, I'll use Ohio State as an example. They have millions of people who follow them on a regular basis. I mean, come on, they're Ohio State. LSU has hundreds of thousands of people. Tulane is a niche. It's this small school of the undergraduates at Tulane are like 8,000, maybe 7,000. That's it. The whole school is like 15,000. It's a small school. So the amount of people who are going to be following Tulane on the on SI site are going to be small, to be honest with you. So we said, let's go ahead and look out. I mean, we've already done things on Facebook and X and all the other social media sites you can think of. I said, why don't we start something that gives an in-depth view of what goes on? We can put interviews on there. We can when we're at practices, we can do the B-roll in the background while I'm talking, and it like the spring practice has been very, very popular on our YouTube channel. I have less than 100 subscribers, but it's only been around for about a month and a half, 2 months. So I'm looking to bump it up, obviously. But what I do is I just use the equipment that I already know, in being in radio for so long, and and I use the equipment that I know, and then I just go out and just find stories that I think people would like. As an example, Tulane had a all conference place kicker, all conference punter last year. And when John Sumrall left Tulane and went to Florida, both of those guys followed him. And so there's a competition. And let's go ahead and talk about these two guys. And so we got the two guys in there and talked to them at the same time, not at the same time, one after another. And it was a very interesting conversation, probably close to about 15, 20 minutes total, combined with the two. And we got a lot of good feedback. People saying that it was a good to talk to them about their background, where they came from, what the competition is like. One's a local kid who went to a local school here in New Orleans. Another kid is a transfer from Ohio State that came to Tulane this year. So it's a really good that's the kind of thing we look for. That not just, hey, look, who's the quarterback going to be? Let's look at some other things like the line play, etc.
Yeah. So sticking to Tulane, to the Tulane Green Wave football team. In your opinion, Doug, since the late 2010s, let's just go back that far. Since the late 2010s, in your opinion, how has Tulane athletics, football program and otherwise, how has that developed over the years? Because as we just saw last year, the Tulane Green Wave, they made it to the college football playoff last year.
I think this is a different athletic program. This is the third straight athletic director that has put an emphasis, with the approval of the Tulane president, has put an emphasis on football. Truth be told, and it's probably like this. Sorry about the siren. Truth be told, that football drives Tulane athletics, and it's probably like that for most colleges. And so the football program had not been doing well for a long, long time. And then the athletic director at the time, Troy Dannon, said, we need to make a change there. And he did. And he brought in a guy by the name of Willie Fritz. You may have heard of him before.
Yep.
Yeah, did not do well, like 2-10 in his third year. And people were starting to wonder, is this the right guy? And then Tulane then had the biggest turnaround in the history of college football, going from 2-10 to 12-2 in 1 year, and then won the Cotton Bowl and against USC in a game that Tulane came back and won literally in the last seconds of the game. And that really did sort of set sort of an aim, something to aim for, because Fritz the next year ended up in Houston, and Summerall was brought on. Summerall came from Troy State. So what you've seen is an emphasis on Tulane football. Tulane used to play in the Superdome. And before that, they played in a gigantic stadium at Tulane Stadium, Sugar Bowl Stadium, on the campus, tore it down because it was just falling apart. Played in the Superdome, and it was cavernous. Tulane was not doing well. They were, if they were lucky to have 5 or 6 wins in a year, and the Superdome sits, 65, 70,000 people. You're lucky to have 4,000 or 5,000, 6,000 at that time, and it's just empty. And besides that, it's miles and miles and miles away from the campus. And so they knew they had to do something about that. So they said, let's go ahead and build a stadium, on-site stadium, which they hadn't had in 30 years. And so they built Yulman Stadium, small, about 25, maybe 28,000 you could fit in the stadium. On a overcrowd, OBO, you're talking 30. And it's built much like people talk about Seattle, the Seattle Seahawks Stadium, how it's just built like a bowl coming up like that, and the sound just crashes in on you. Yulman, as small as it is extreme. Yulman Stadium, Yulman is how it's spelled, is extremely loud. For only 25, 30,000 seats, it is deafening. I've been on the field during ball games. And so Tulane decided, we're going to make a commitment. We're going to rebuild a smaller version of our stadium that we used to have. Tulane held 90,000 in those days. And so we're going to build a smaller version of our stadium, but we're going to make it so that it's very compact. It's very, very intimate. And it is. And it really is a home field advantage for Tulane. So when Tulane made that commitment, that was the very first step to saying football is going to be our emphasis, because football is now being emphasized. Before that, essentially baseball was really good. Basketball was good for a few years, like 30, 40 years ago, but it just really wasn't. But football really has not been good consistently, probably since the 1970s. And so somebody decided, we've got to make a commitment on this, and they did. And that's why you've seen that much of a turnaround. I'm doing a series of interviews, the last one of which runs Wednesday, April the 15th. and the interview is with the athletic director of Tulane, David Harris. And I asked him in the 4 parts that were over a period of 4 days. And the last one that comes out on Wednesday, I asked him, "What is your vision for Tulane?" And his answer blew me away. I thought he was going to say something like, "Oh, football's got to be number one, or basketball's got to be this, or baseball's got to be this." And that wasn't it. And I don't want to give away what the real answer was. So I hope you don't mind, Stephen. I'm not going to say too much about it. But essentially, he blew me away with his answer. I did not expect him to say what he said. And it was if there's a Tulane fan, they see that part of the interview, their heart should be warmed and they should be pumped up, because what he said really was mind blowing for me. It really was. I did not expect for him to answer what he answered.
Wow. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to that. When it comes out, I would definitely watch that part.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah. So Tulane has been playing in the American Conference for a few years now, and so this kind of relates to a question that I have in mind here. It's about conference realignment.
Yeah.
Where do you see Tulane fitting in all this? Do you see Tulane staying in the American Conference for years to come, or do you think there's going to be some sort of switch at any point where they could move to another conference?
Yeah, that's a great question, Stephen. I think about what the American is. It is more of a directional conference. People joke about that, because you have Eastern this and Western that and Central that, and there's a lot of, they call it a directional conference. And when you have those kinds of conferences, it does tend to sort of limit. Tulane was part of the SEC back until the mid 1950s. And then the Tulane administration at the time said, we are going to leave the SEC because we're putting more of an emphasis on our academics. We've put too much of an emphasis on athletics. And so Tulane, one of the original members of the Southeastern Conference, withdrew from the SEC. Of course, Tulane fans still are upset about that to this day. Now, I'll say that if Tulane will probably never get welcomed back into the SEC, even though they were one of the founding members. But I do think that that Tulane could move to another conference. The question is, what conference would Tulane be willing to move into? Because the Pac, the Pac 10, 12, whatever they're going to call whatever number they're going to associate with the word Pac, is too much travel. I mean, that's just way, way too much. And then, there's the SEC, too big. SEC is even looking at what? Separating from the NCAA, from what I hear. ACC could be a possibility. And at least that's more, contained a little bit. And then there's always the Big East as a possibility. But even then, you got a lot of travel to do. And I did talk briefly to the athletic director about that, and that worries them. So because even though in this day of NIL and the monies that are coming into schools and everything else, these kids are still supposed to be students. And if they're missing class because they have to travel to, Oregon or Seattle or something like that, it's going to be almost impossible for them to continue to be part of that student part of the student athlete. And so if Tulane does move, I would think that an ACC move would be a better one for the school, and a better one for traveling. But the athletic director was very very quiet when I asked him about that. He sort of held all of his cards very close to his chest, because Tulane did look at the Pac 10, 12, 15, whatever there are now, at one time, just a year or two ago, and decided no, that it's not going to be for them. And they weren't the only ones. So, I mean, there are some good schools within the American. Memphis used to be outstanding basketball program and baseball program. They've fallen on some hard times recently, but they do have some good programs within the American Conference. And then there's always the temples of the world, and you look at that and you say Tulsa, and the traveling is good where the way the American is set up right now. Now let's see if there's going to be any commitment by other schools. I think that that's going to be the determining factor. If Temple decides we're not going to play where the Philadelphia Eagles play anymore because that place is like what Tulane used to do in the Superdome, it's cavernous, and they decide we're going to go ahead and build a place on campus like Tulane did. They put that commitment in, and then all of a sudden you have a different American Conference, and it is more competitive, and it's something that is usable by all the colleges. So I think if Tulane had its preference, they would have more of a commitment from the colleges that are already in within the American. But if that doesn't happen, I think in the future you're looking at another move probably. But Tulane has to commit itself to being commit itself to being a top tier program in all sports. Example: baseball does not have all 34 kids under scholarship that are on the baseball program, or 35. What is it? 34? 30? I can't remember. I think it's 34. But not all of them have full scholarship, even though the NCAA allows it, because Tulane doesn't have the money for it. They don't put the money into it. So the baseball program doesn't have all the full scholarships. The NIL money is not there for basketball, and it is there for football, but it's not there for basketball. And so that's why you see their star guard for the men's basketball team, Rowan Brumbaugh, entered the portal last week, the transfer portal. And this kid is really, really, really good. But Tulane didn't have the money to go and keep up with him.
Yeah. And I asked that question because it comes, it just hits me all the time when it comes to conference realignment. All these questions about, oh, which school is going to go where, and the chatter that I hear just on my end when it comes to schools like Tulane would be a conference like the ACC, and I hear that a lot. And that seems to make the most sense to me that Tulane would eventually go to the ACC because we hear about stuff about ACC schools being, approached by the big conferences, Big Ten and SEC, and then as a backfill option, I hear Tulane being mentioned as one of those options for the ACC as a
Yeah.
result. So
And I think that would be a good one. And you know what Tulane does every time that, because they're in a different boat than say an LSU is. That doesn't mean that LSU is better or Tulane's better. Or it doesn't mean that. But Tulane has academic requirements that most public schools in the South do not have. So, I mean, so that's why the ACC, in my opinion, would be a much better fit because Duke is in the ACC and their academic requirements are higher too. So you have those kinds of schools that have higher academic standards. So Tulane would sort of fit with that, you know. Stanford has higher academic standards too, but would you want to travel all the way to the West Coast? You know, no, no, no. So I mean, it's that's part of the problem that the Pac 12, 15, 28, whatever they are now, has. I think ACC really would be the more preferred one for Tulane, but I don't think all the connections have been made yet. Tulane does not have, for instance, they don't have a lacrosse program. They don't have a women's softball program. What they do have is more a low budget program. So Tulane, for instance, has a sailing program. There's a reason why. Just on the northern side, New Orleans is called the Crescent City because they have this river that goes around the south side. Well, right on the northern side of the city is Lake Pontchartrain, and Lake Pontchartrain is this the average is around 12 feet deep. That's it. That's it. So sailing is done on that thing all the time, and Tulane has one of the top sailing programs in the country. I don't think anybody in the ACC has a sailing program. Tulane decided, hey, let's go and do a low budget thing like bowling, but they put a little money into it. Tulane's the 17th ranked bowling team, women, 17th ranked bowling team in the country. But most people would say, it's bowling, give me a break. So, and I don't mean it ugly toward the bowling team. I mean, 17th ranked is pretty darn good. They went to the NCAAs in track and field and men's track and field, cross country, sorry, this past fall. It's, they have those kinds of programs, but they don't have the ACC type programs. So I think Tulane would have to make an adjustment, and being an inner city school, they're in uptown New Orleans. which is a sort of a ritzier area of New Orleans. Even when they built the Yulman Stadium there, they had to promise they wouldn't go above a certain height on one side of the stadium. So the other side of the stadium is a lot taller. It has a double deck, and then the press box side is really short because they promised the neighborhood they wouldn't build it any higher than what it was. So Tulane has some things to go through before they could be ACC worthy, I think.
Yeah. So, sticking to that, when it comes to college sports in general, the future of college sports, you mentioned this earlier about NIL and transfer portal and topics like that, along with, might as well mention this too, governance, conference realignment. As a whole, where do you see this going with college sports in general? I know this may be a loaded question, but
It
where do you
is.
see the future of college sports headed?
Would you mind doing me a favor when I get through? Would you mind answering that same question? Would that be okay?
You go right ahead. Yeah, that'd be
Okay,
great.
okay.
Yeah,
As long as we trade, as long as we trade.
go ahead.
I think NIL, the way it's built right now, is not sustainable. I don't think you can continue. And I think even the students agree with that. The ones that I've talked to, the ones that are student athletes, they know they love seeing the money come in. That's nice, but they also know that it's not sustainable the way it is right now. I mentioned to the athletic director at Tulane, David Harris, what about uh, a collective bargaining agreement, a CBA? That has actually been mentioned by various people. And he said, that's not he didn't complain about it. He didn't say that's not possible. He said, but that's not the model that they're under right now. The NIL model that they have right now needs to be tweaked correctly. If they want to go CBA, which I think is the way they should go. If they want to go CBA, they have to totally change the model. And I see what he's saying. I mean, think about it. NBA and Major League Baseball and football, they all have CBAs. But if they do it correctly, you don't want to wait for for politicians to step in, because that is a possibility. I'm not talking politics here. I don't mean to sound like I'm talking about politics here. I'm just saying, if you wait for politicians to step in, you're asking for them to do something that they're not used to doing. So instead, the NCAA should decide which model do they want to follow. NIL. If they follow NIL, let's go ahead and figure out a way to make it fair for the students and fair for the universities. If they do go to a CBA type agreement, then essentially the kids become employees of the school. And that changes the entire model. It blows away any kind of college model we have right now. And I think a CBA would be a fairer way to go. You have lawyers who can sit down at the table and talk everything out and get everything settled. And then you can agree to that over a 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 year period, like they do in the professional sports. And then if it doesn't fit, you rework it and try it again. I really, the NIL model that they have right now is not sustainable. They can't keep going that way. So what do you say?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you when it comes to things like NIL. I honestly don't like how it's being managed right now, NIL across the board. It's too much like the Wild West, so to
Yep.
speak, where it's like anything goes. There's no real rules in place. You got to have rules. You got to have some sort of guardrails in place. Otherwise, you're going to keep having issues such as, for example, uh, what happened with Clemson and Ole Miss. If you
Yeah.
remember that
Yeah, I
linebacker,
do. Yeah.
Dabo Swinney, he went on the press conference talking all about that, calling out Ole Miss. I was like, you
Yep.
cannot keep having issues like that happen.
I
You
agree.
just can't. If you're going to have any sort of integrity as a governing body, as a sport, for all
Mhm.
sports, not just football, but it's like if you're going to keep going with NIL, you have to adjust it. You have to make it worth the while of everybody, not just certain
Mhm.
schools.
I think they
Um,
have to be guardrails, don't you think?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, guardrails.
the only guardrails they have right now are the dates. And by the way, they are now fairer. The dates are for basketball, especially. Basketball, remember that, I don't know if you remember this, but last year the transfer portal happened in the second week of the NCAA tournament.
Right.
And I'm going, what the heck are you doing? So this year they said after the championship game, for the women, it's the next day. And for the men, it's one day later because their championship game is one day later. Then you'll have a 2 week transfer portal unless there's a coaching change. That was much fairer, much better idea. And I'm hoping football does the same thing. I'm hoping they settle on something like that. But because before that, it was like, whoa, it was crazy. And I'm with you. I got to put some guardrails up, figure out some rules that are fair because truth is, college athletics has been making a bundle, especially the big schools, a bundle of money on those student athletes for decades and decades and decades. And the kids have been getting a scholarship. And don't get me wrong, that's good. A kid going to Tulane instead of paying 45, 50, 60,000 a year, which is what Tulane costs. It's a lot of money. They don't have to pay that if they have a full scholarship. And so that in itself is pretty cool. But at the same time, you could also go to, another school like that's UCLA, where you could get a really, really good education, and then all of a sudden, you're also living on the West Coast. You get to go, go surfing or whatever else you do over there in Los Angeles. I don't know because I've never been, but there are. I think there need to be rules, like you said. There need to be rules. There needs to be guardrails, something where you protect the sport and the student and the schools. Because if the students get too much money, then the schools say, "Well, we're out of business." I mean, there's schools that are in the negative balance now by the millions because of the money they spent on NIL this past year. You can't do that. It's not sustainable.
Yeah. And I've heard stories about that too, where even big schools, like for example, Rutgers, they've been getting into debt apparently
Yep.
because of
Yep.
all that spending. And I
Yep.
read
They're in the
stories
red.
like that, and I read stories
Mhm.
like that. I'm like, what's going on there? You guys are Rutgers. You're a Big Ten school. Why are you having economic
Yeah.
issues?
Yeah.
So it kind of blows my mind in a way. And to your point about the CBA, I'm all for it. If it can be managed in such a way that, again, it's fair for everybody, then yeah, go for it. Go for a
Yep.
CBA. Um, but I'm not sure if schools across the board are willing to make uh, students employees. I'm not sure if they're willing to go that far as of right now. So I'm undecided about that as far
Yeah.
as if it's actually going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that it is like the athletic director at Tulane said, it is a total change. I mean, complete flip around. But at the same time, why don't you think about it? I do public address announcing on the side for Tulane baseball, and so when I'm there, I'm in a booth, well, PA guy, and they have another man over here who does the video board, and somebody else who's running the sound, and somebody else is doing the video replay for the umpires. And there are students sitting next to me, and those students are getting paid to do that job. So a minor version of that model is already in place because there's student workers all over every campus at every university in this country. So it's not like they have to totally remake the model because there are already student workers there. They just have to figure out, okay, what this is the model we use with student workers. What kind of model should we use for student athletes? What should we do for that? And if they use the same exact model, just tweak it to go ahead and fit, it may be more doable than what universities paint the picture to be.
Yeah. So a follow-up question to what I just asked, such as the future of college sports, sticking to just football, because we've heard a lot of chatter behind the curtain, so to speak, about, oh, the SEC might break away from the NCAA or the big power conferences themselves, the Power Four, Power Two, whatever you want to call them. They're just going to break away from everybody else, and the group of six might be left in a really tough situation. Um, how do you feel about the group of six conferences where they stand right now, Doug? With Tulane, of course, and of course, my school, Ohio, being in those group of six conferences, um, should they still be involved in events like the college football playoff? And what do you think they should do going forward? Should they band together to do something on their own, or what would you have in mind?
Years and years ago, before any of this ever came up. Uh, it used to be called the football championship, for the lower schools. Teams like around Louisiana, we had teams like Nicholls State and Northwestern State and McNeese and Southeastern and other schools like that that were in the lower division. There were various divisions of the big division. There were two divisions of the big division of football, and besides, then after that, you had Division 2, 3, and 4. And so now, of course, you have the schools wanted to go and make more money, and so a lot of schools were trying to join the upper division, that now has the playoffs. For years and years and years, that other division of the top division was the 1A is what it used to be called, Division 1A. That was when I was doing play-by-play for Northwestern State University. They already had a playoff situation under control. They knew what they were doing. They had it all done. People saying, "Look, everybody else, Division 1A in those days, 1A and 1AA is what it was called. Sorry. Then Division 2, Division 3, basketball, baseball. Everybody else has the playoffs except Division 1A. So why can't we do that?" And so they tried, as you well know, the sort of halfway. That's not the term I want to use. I want to use another term that has to do with a donkey. But the halfway way of doing things, and that's they had, like the four teams, and now we've expanded it to this many teams. I I think it was. I think they've gone about it the wrong way. I think this needs to be completely rethought. And this has been my go-to idea since before there was ever anything, any of those playoff systems. I think you should retain the bowl games, and the bowl games should be part of a multi-game playoff system. Okay, one other thing I'm going to throw out there. I remember when college football, can remember, I'm an old guy, okay? I remember when college football had 10 games and people were saying, let's go to 11. And coaches and administrators said, no, because these are student athletes. And then all of a sudden, some of the big conferences started going to 11 and then to 12 with an open date and then a conference playoff game. I mean, it all comes down to this. That's what it all comes down to. But I think all of that should go away. And if you're asking for my ideal, if that's what you're asking, you're asking
Yeah.
for my, hey, what do you think should be the
Yeah.
right way to do it? I think the right way to do it is bring those little bowls back, the Liberty Bowl, all these other bowls that are smaller bowls, that and they had all these, sponsored names. So bring back those smaller bowls. Let them be the early play-in kind of things that get into the playoffs. I mean, basketball does that now. Basketball does it now. They have play-in games. So instead of making it, hey, look, we've got to separate from the NCAA. No, give the SEC or Big Ten or whoever else, hey, look, you're still the big boys. You're still making the big bucks. You get a couple of weeks off, but you'd have to eliminate that extra game. You'd have to eliminate the conference championship games, and you have to eliminate that bye week. Go back to 10 games. Who cares? And then what you do is you rank them. You have people going and you say, look, you can even have, every SEC, so every team in the SEC should be in the playoffs. No, they shouldn't, but they think they should. So let's say SEC says, we're going to go ahead and say every team should be. That's fine. The bottom team, whoever they are this year, usually it's Vanderbilt. Let's say the bottom team, that's the team that goes to the Lawnmower Bowl up in Shreveport, Louisiana, or whatever, and then they play some other team and they just play in. And then it makes everything fairer. And those SEC schools all of a sudden are making the amount of money they want to make. And then you just have this playoff system that's already in place by using the bowl games. Now, is it something that would have to be designed and worked on? Of course. But look, they've been doing it for years in the playoff system, in the championship system. The next division down. They've been doing it for years. Doing it Division 2 and 3. They've been doing it for years. So all you got to do is just follow their lead. That's my solution to this issue. Will they buy it? No, no, they haven't bought it yet, but I think it would be fair. In those little bowls, can you imagine LSU or Ohio State or Alabama going to Shreveport, Louisiana to play in that lawnmower bowl or whatever they're called up there now? Can you imagine Independence Stadium, which fits 45,000 people? They'd have to build a bigger stadium because all of a sudden they're having this gigantic team come there. I mean, it's the the possibilities are really incredible, at least in my book. This is that's just me though. So what do you think?
Yeah, I do think the Group of Six conferences they need to stay in the mix. They need to be acknowledged for what they are. And yes, they're not the same as the big boys. Nobody's saying that, but they need to have a voice. They need to have a seat at the table. And it's just my concern that the Group of Six conferences are just going to be left behind after all this, uh, after all these power struggles and what have you. I'm just concerned because I follow a Mid American Conference school, and
Right.
we hear it a lot up here in MAC territory that, oh, the MAC's not doing well economically. I get
Mhm.
that. I acknowledge that and I hear that, but I just get concerned. It's like we have to be treated fairly, just like the big boys. And I'm just really concerned that some of us are just going to be left behind by force, if that makes sense.
I think if there's something, if nothing's done,
Yeah.
if nothing is done, if no one steps in, like, okay, years ago, the reason that the group of six, or then at that time it was group of five schools, even got into the playoffs, and I'm not disparaging anybody else, is because the Tulane president came up before the NCAA and says, "This is not right. This is what I suggest. Something has to be done." And they did. So I think what has to happen is enough of the presidents of these schools that are in group of six need to step up and say, "Look, Greg Sankey," and I know Greg Sankey. He was the commissioner of the Southland Conference when I was doing Northwestern State University games, and so I know Greg. I know Greg well. He may not remember me now, but I mean I know of him, and I think it's. I don't think there's a lot of self-effacing humor going on at SEC. I think it's mostly this, a lot of chest pounding. And I think these other presidents need to step up, talk to the presidents of these other schools that are in the Big Ten, the SEC, and all those other ones, and say, look, this isn't right. What you're doing isn't right. We've got to do something about it. And they should have a plan in place. And if they don't, then I think what you're saying is going to happen. I really think the SEC is going to say, bye, we don't need you. And that's a shame. That really is a shame. Because it is sort of fun to have to see these, like when USC was beaten by Tulane in the Cotton Bowl a few years ago. That was not USC people didn't like that, Southern Cal people, but most of the country did. So those kinds of games where you have a team from the MAC or a team from the American that is playing a team from one of the big boy conferences, I think that's a big deal. I think that is something that most people want to see. Uh, and the possibilities of that are incredible. And meanwhile, I think the people from the SEC said, look, if we just play amongst ourselves, we don't have to worry about competing against those little guys and possibly getting upset. I think that's part of it.
Yep. So, one last question before we start wrapping up here. You said you've had a lot of experience, about 50 years in sports reporting slash sports writing in general. Um, Probably a two-parter to finish this. In all of your years being a sports reporter slash writer, what has really changed in that process when you're writing an article or you're reporting about sports? And what advice would you have? There's a second part. What advice would you have for somebody who's wanting to get into that?
That's a great question. I actually have. I know you never know it by looking at me. I'm 70 years old. I know I look about 90, but my grandson is actually working for me as a writer for on SI Tulane. And I had to teach him things that, and he's a fast learner. Thank goodness he's good. I'm not saying he's my grandson. He's really, really done well. But I had to teach him things that were not being taught by journalism departments today. I mean, he didn't know all the things that I had to teach him. I think so. I think what has changed is I think journalism schools are in this period of limbo. So I think what has changed is that journalists and journalism schools don't exactly know what they should do. Um, Radio, newspaper, even TV, not doing as well as it used to. As most stuff, you and I are proof of this, has gone online. And with that, there are people who consider themselves experts, who think that they can analyze anything, who think that that they have the expertise that is needed. And one of the things I try to teach people who work for me is that you don't. You may know a lot, you may watch a lot, but what really matters is that you cover a lot. So if you want to learn about a team, then you go to every practice you can. You don't just go to a game and think you can come up with the solution. So, as an example, I'm not patting myself on the back. This is just what I've done all my life. Spring football has been held. They have a total of 15 practices that they're going through in the spring, and I've gone to every one of the practices. I can't video anything except like a very short period, like a little 20-minute period in there. But what I'm doing, I'm taking notes and I'm noticing things. And once you have done something for a long enough period of time, you become better at it. So don't ask me to go change the brakes on my car. I've done it once, and that's all. Don't ever ask me to go change the brakes. I guarantee you that car will never be able to stop again. But if you want me to, go ahead and cover a football or a basketball team, got it. I'm going to go watch every practice they have. Drives my wife crazy, but I'm still going to go watch every practice they have to make sure that I'm asking the right questions, learning about the kids that are playing the sport, and can do it from a journalistic standpoint, from a way of looking at it holistically, not just from I've seen enough NFL games in my life where I can make a decision. So if I were to make a suggestion, because there are a lot of people who are online, who are doing sports, who or think they have the answers, and I'm gonna let you know that the more you observe, the more you can become an expert and become an analyst for that sport, whatever the sport may be. Um, that's at least where I come from. Doing this for so long, I have seen that some people really do put in the time, but there are some that don't. And if you put in the time and the effort, then you have a chance to go ahead and become someone who is not well renowned, but well respected. I think that's more important than figuring out whether your name is the Stephen A. Smiths of the world. I would rather people know that when they come to my site, that they're going to see the truth, they're going to see quotes, they're going to see analysis from someone who's been around it for a long, long time. And when they see that, they know that they can believe what I'm telling them. That doesn't mean we're always right. Like, for instance, I had two sources talk to me about the new Tulane football coach, and the two sources within Tulane told me that this particular guy had agreed to terms with the Tulane administration. His name is Blake Baker, defensive coordinator for LSU, former Tulane player. And I said, okay. And so I wrote, that was my story. And Blake Baker is not the Tulane head football coach. He's still at LSU. Lane Kiffin came up. He said, look, I give you a lot more money and you don't have to worry about all the headaches. And Baker stayed. My story was not wrong. but it's something that you have to sort of weigh. So I've tried to make sure that I don't make as many predictions as much as I analyze the information that I have in front of me. So I I'm not into predicting coaching changes anymore, but I am into instead giving analysis on baseball, which I've followed in basketball and football. And don't ask me to do analysis on bowling; I can't do that.
Yeah. So, for those of you listening and watching this right now, I will provide a link in the description box below that will take you to the Green Wave Report, the YouTube channel, where Doug provides fantastic commentary and he gives you great insight about the Tulane Green Wave for all their sports programs. So, I would like to thank you so much, Doug Joubert, for being here, being my special guest on this show. And I'd like to thank you guys for watching. We'll be back with another interview very shortly. Take care,
Thank
guys.
you, thank you, Steve.
Thank you.